Hello everyone, welcome to flight number 47 in my trip from Bavaria to New Zealand in the C172. Today in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 we're going to fly from Ul-Adiad to Yas Island, which is just a bit further east along the Gulf. Our trip is going to take us 85 or so nautical miles on a heading of about 140. So we'll jump in now the cockpit, get the engine started, and then we'll contact ATC for instructions. Before we begin then, a couple of early security and pre-flight checks. Flaps are in the up position, cockpit is secure, there's nothing immediately in front of the prop. I'm going to take the yoke off here, batteries off, magnetos are off, circuit breakers are all in, electrics are all off. Mixture, I will just lean that up. Fuel is on the right tack. Fuel shut off is currently turned on, so I'll have to get rid of that. We'll turn the brakes on. Come on. There we go. Right. So we're good to pretty much start the aeroplane then. So let's go through the start procedures. I'll turn the fuel shut off to the on position. We'll just give the battery a push. Engage the fuel pump. Rich the mixture. Count to about 3 or 4. Bring that back to nearly out. Fuel cock is in the right position. A little bit of throttle on. Double check the electrics are off. Check there's no one in front of the prop, which there isn't. And we should be good to start this airplane. Okay, toe brakes in as well now. I'm just going to hold them on. Actually, I'll let the park brake do the job there. We'll go full rich on the mixture. Just checking the RPM, so we can set it about 1100 or so. Let the engine just warm up while we're doing this. Okay, we'll turn on a few more bits and pieces now. Alternator can come on. Beacon, landing light, taxi light, nav light, strobe on. Not going to use the pitot heat today, it's plenty warm outside. Everything now is settling down, so we'll give the avionics some power. Let them all initialize. And we can call up ATC in just a moment. Good, all the warning signals are off. We're good to call up ATC to request our taxi. Now that we're all started and good to go, we'll tune to the ground channel and we'll depart out to the south. I think it's probably the best way. The runways are aligned in that direction. Right, we are to taxi and hold short of runway 34 left, taxi via A, cross 16 left, and then echo. Contact tower when ready. Okay, so we're going to taxi, hold short of runway 34 left. Runway 34 left is the other runway on the other side of me going left to right, because that's about north that way. So I need to taxi down to the threshold down that end of the field, along 16 left, via taxiway Alpha. So 16 left via taxiway Alpha. 16 left is this one close to me here that goes from my right down that way towards the south. So Alpha must be down there somewhere. Okay, I've acknowledged, so we're going to taxi out. I'll tune onto tower once we get over to our hold short of 34 left. Right, I hope I've remembered all that. I'm taxiing in that direction anyway, that's the best thing I know for starters. Brakes on, remove those brakes there. I'm going to swing the airplane around to the right and hopefully I don't chop that guy's head off with the left wing. He's not looking. And there are no other aircraft here, so I'm free to taxi out now and follow this line around to the left. I'm going to go full forward to this point here and then left and then right. Follow this yellow line around. Didn't really need to do that. Could have just taxied straight forward. Probably should have. Hey, nothing like a little bit of S turning just to get you in the mood. Taxi well clear of that chap. So we're looking for taxiway Alpha as we go down 16 left, and then we're going to hold short of 34 left. Current heading is about 16, so got vehicles up here. What are you guys doing? Those vehicles are holding for me. They better hold for me. That's a road there. That is not a taxiway. So this is 16 left, or 16 left. Don't have any aircraft on approach as far as I can see. Looks like we're clear to taxi. Don't want to just taxi out onto an active runway and get hit by something that's on final approach, do I? That would be silly. Quick glance down there. Nothing. A few smaller aircraft parked on the left. A couple of ground vehicles going about their business. Don't want to taxi too quickly because I don't actually know where Alpha is, so I've just got to keep my eyes open for Alpha on the boards. The boards do tend to sneak up on you pretty quickly, so I kind of have to use the zoom. I wonder if this is Alpha just here on the right. I've got some... Okay, I've got some boards over there. I'm just going to see if I can see what they are. That says Alpha 34R, 16L. That says Alpha. That goes me onto 34 right and 16L. Don't think that's the right taxiway because I want 34L. Let's taxi on. .34 left. I finally found my hold short point after taxiing around for quite some time, being a little bit confused, I must say, by this airfield layout and the signage. I'm now holding short of 34L, which is exactly where I need to be. Let's tune to tower. And I'm going to request takeoff clearance. Clear for takeoff, 34 left, south departure approved. Excellent, we're good to go. Let's acknowledge takeoff clearance. So 34 left, we're going to taxi out. Quick check of the airspace. No one's on approach. Going to line up and go straight. I'm not going to bother with any holding and whatnot. Busy airfields. Let's just get this aeroplane airborne. Taxiing out then. Should I have an engine failure, I'm going to... this runway, it turns out, is inactive. Should I have an engine failure, I'm just going to fly straight ahead and look for a field to land in, unless, of course, I think I have enough altitude and airspeed to make a right-hand turn and take 16 left. Let's go. Up. We are airborne. Climbing out. Reduce the RPM just a fraction. Maintain runway heading. Let's get back onto 3-4 just for a moment or two longer. Then we are going to turn left onto my southerly heading. Get clear of the field and then turn southeast. Approaching 1,000 feet. Just about clear of the field now. Don't want to end up on that runway. So that's actually the active runway. We noticed that in the previous flight when we landed here. that this runway's got yellow crosses around it. It's not actually usable. But Microsoft Flight Simulator seems to think that both runways are in fact active. So that's a bit frustrating, but that's just the way it is for now. We can turn left and do quite a wide turn to the southeast, or I can turn right, potentially across traffic. I haven't been told which way to turn. Continue for south departure. I'll contact you next when you leave my airspace. I should keep that box open actually. For some reason the ATC, I don't have any audio coming from them. Despite I think having the ATC audio turned on, I'm not hearing anything, so I do need that dialogue box open, which is a little annoying. I'm going to turn right then. Checking the airspace over there, I don't see anything, nothing ahead. We'll turn on to a bearing of about 140, and while we're doing that I'm going to move my heading indicator also onto that same heading. Coming through 090 right about now. Get clear of this field. Well clear of it now. Just a little less on the mixture, approaching 2,000 feet. Just about on my desired heading as well. That'll do. We'll gain another 500 feet or so, and then we'll turn the AP on. So, turn some lights off now that we're away from the field. Taxi and landing lights off. Strobe, pitot heat we won't need. Coming up on 2,500 feet. I'm not going to go up much beyond that. I think that's plenty suitable for this little flight today. That's about 2,500 then. Going to allow the nose to settle. Come left onto my desired track, just a fraction. That'll do for the nose. Just bring the view up a fraction as well. You're leaving my airspace, frequency change approved. Good, acknowledge frequency change. Contact Doha approach. I'll just listen in on Doha. We're actually gonna contact Yas when we get closer to Yas. That'll do, let's turn the AP on. Right, heading in altitude. Now let's just check that the aeroplane does do what I want it to do. We've got 140 at about 2,700 feet. Airspeed's coming up. Check the RPM. Not gonna get too fast here, but I'm happy to do about 90 to 100 knots. Excellent. We're on autopilot now, heading away from Ul-Adiad. It's actually a US military base, I've been told, since the last flight. We are heading southeast towards Yas Island, which is out there beyond the horizon by the looks of things at the moment in the Emirates. Whilst we're flying now, we can pick up from Johnny Johnson's Wing Leader book. So I've been reading this book throughout the series of flights. For those who weren't familiar, it is Wing Leader by Johnny Johnson, and it chronicles his time as a Spitfire pilot, squadron and wing leader during the Second World War. Currently at the section of the book where he is about to move to Tangmere with his squadron. The squadron's being led by Douglas Barder at this point, and there is a party that's just been happening in the mess to say farewell to their airfield at Curtin Lindsey as they pack up and head to Tangmere. So we'll pick up kind of just as Johnny Johnson is leaving this party, and I'm going to just fix track eye out and we'll get reading. I left the anteroom when the party was in full swing, for I was in charge of the ground crews and the train left at some unearthly hour. Apart from the troops, I was responsible for the safe conveyance of a pack of dogs, including Cocky's surprisingly unintelligent yellow retriever, so that I was not going to have a leisurely journey. The champagne corks were still popping, and along the length of one corridor the defeat of Cornwallis at Yorktown was being reenacted with some spirit. Numerous fire extinguishers were being deployed by the Americans, whilst the inferior British fire was restricted to soda siphons from behind a defensive screen of Mr. Smith's potted plants. Once again, as in 1776, the Americans had the upper hand, and both the Palms and the British were decidedly worse for wear. Our first day at Tangmere was spent in a visit to the operations room to meet the controllers and staff upon whom we were so dependent once we were in the air. Then we were conducted to the senior intelligence officer, who gave us a long talk on the Luftwaffe's order of battle, on the escape and evasive techniques we ought to adopt should we be shot down in France. He concluded with an appraisal of the qualities of the Messerschmitt 109F. This latest product from the skillful designs of Willy Messerschmitt, although similar in appearance to the 109E except for its rounded wingtips, had some improved armament, a higher ceiling of 36,500 feet, and a top speed of 396 miles per hour at 22,000 feet. The chief difference between the Spitfire II and the 1 was the installation of the Rolls-Royce Merlin 12 engine in the former, which provided extra power and incorporated the Kaufmann cartridge starter. In addition, the recent experiences of fighter pilots had made it abundantly clear that the original two-position air screws of the Spitfire 1 were inadequate for modern conditions of combat. Either de Havilland or Rotel constant-speed air screws were fitted to our present aircraft, which gave us marked improvement in climb and ceiling. It remained to be seen how the Spitfire 2 would match up against the Messerschmitt 109F. Tangmere still bore the scars of last autumn's bombing attacks, and flat expanses of rubble indicated the previous positions of hangars and administrative buildings. On an average throughout the year, Tangmere was favoured with better weather than the majority of our airfields, and since it lay just to the east of the creeks and estuaries of West Sussex, it was always fairly easy to find from the air, even in doubtful weather. This feature had one drawback. The Luftwaffe really failed to put in a nightly attack against the airfield, and although it was never put out of commission, the enemy bombers succeeded in knocking down more buildings, including a wing of the officers' mess. It came as no surprise, therefore, when the CO told us that we were to leave Tangmere Mess, and in future we would be accommodated in the nearby village of Owing. Rushman's was an old, low, rambling house of some character, and we moved in with great enthusiasm, for a fighter squadron is very self-contained, and its morale is greatly influenced by the manner and the style in which its members live together. One of our squadron armourers, Fred Varley of Nottingham, had been injured when his barrack block was hit by a bomb. The first thing Varley remembered about the incident was when he came to in hospital with a burst eardrum. He soon recovered, but his medical grading was reduced so that he was unable to continue his work on our guns. Since he was a cheerful fellow with a keen sense of humour and plenty of initiative, we moved him into Rushman's as a batman, where his services eventually became invaluable. As it later turned out, we were to serve together for several more years. Except for an occasional high-flying reconnaissance flight, the single-seaters of the Luftwaffe were rarely seen over England during those early months of 1941. But their twin-engine bombers were active by night. There were sharp attacks against Birmingham, Southampton, Liverpool, Bristol and Plymouth. The dreadful inadequacy of our night defenders at this time can well be imagined from the stark fact that for every 1,000 bombers that crossed our coasts, only 6 were brought down by ack-ack or night fighters. For instance, on the 14th of November 1940, when Coventry was attacked by more than 300 bombers, only 1 Blenheim was able to open fire against the invaders. Later in the month, when Birmingham and Liverpool were fiercely attacked at night, not a single bomber was intercepted. In order to augment the slender night defences, the day fighter squadrons had already been instructed to train pilots in the fighter night role. The theory behind the fighter night concept was that Spitfires or Hurricanes would patrol over the target areas in a height band of medium altitude. Individual Spitfires were separated by small height intervals, and the heavy ack-ack guns only had freedom of fire well below our lowest altitude. The controller, we were assured, would see to it that our prowling twin-engined night fighters were kept well clear of the Spitfire patrol lines. In theory, we were only supposed to fly on fighter nights when the moon would give us a fair chance of seeing an enemy bomber, but in practice we flew on some dirty nights and were sometimes badly frightened in the process. The regular night fighter pilots possess their own radar equipment and skilled radar operators who usually combined with the controller on the ground to bring about a night interception. Generally speaking, the controller passed a broad picture to the Beaufighter crew and gave the pilot several vectors until the target was picked up on the radar screen of the night fighter. The radar operator then passed The radar operator then passed his pilot various vectors until a visual sighting was obtained, and after identification, the pilot attacked the enemy with his 4 cannon. This technique was a stealthy, scientific affair, and it was in marked contrast to our relatively clumsy and uninformed operations. Whenever the enemy beam was directed against Portsmouth or Southampton, usually during the late afternoon preceding a raid, we were warned to detail 6 or 8 pilots for a fighter night, and we were usually sent off after the forerunners of the attack, the incendiary carrying bombers, had illuminated the target. Often we could see the raging fires below and the bursting flak, and sometimes the dark canopy of the night was broken by an arc of fire when some Beaufighter scored a success, but no member of our squadron ever claimed a victory at night, and few fired their guns. Nip had an experience which well illustrates the shortcomings of day pilots who tried to fight at night. The outline of the sheltering hills was already growing blurred and dim when he took off, but he climbed to the west and to the light, for the high cloud tops were still brushed with a red and golden fire. For half an hour he flew high above a series of deep ravines formed by the cumulus clouds until these flaming arches of the sky grew dim and only a dull red band was left on the far horizon to mark the sun's descent. When the sky finally lost its colour, the first stars appeared, and with them the first enemy bombers winged their way across the channel, the harbingers of a heavy attack against our airfields. Everything seemed to happen at once. Nip's petrol was getting low, and he called Tangmere for a homing. The controller said that he was very busy with Beaufighters, and would the Spitfire pilot stand by and call again in 5 minutes. Nip stood by, but a bank of industrial smoke drifted across Tangmere from Southampton, and although the full moon was high, the forward visibility was less than a mile. Now he had to fly on instruments for most of the time. Bombs were exploding on the ground below him, and strings of flak drifted up from the gunners. At first they came up very slowly, almost too slowly to be real, like uncoiled necklaces of glowing amber. Suddenly they became very real and dangerous, for they tore past the Spitfire, very close and disconcerting. I need to just check my heading and everything here. Been reading for a little bit, so we'll just do some quick cockpit checks before we carry on reading. Re-enable track IR. The first thing I'm going to do is just get an idea of my track here. Okay, I'm off track by about 10 degrees. Desired track is now down at 124, so I'm just going to bring the heading to the left. Oof, wow. Big jumps on the heading indicator. That should line me back up. Distance remaining is 65 nautical miles, so we've chopped a quarter off the journey as we've left the land behind. Now we're out over the Gulf. Tempted to climb a little here. 2,700 feet doesn't feel like the ideal situation when over water. I guess if I had 8,000 feet or so, that would make me a little bit happier. Plenty of time then to put a radio call out if the engine failed. But I'm going to ignore my better judgment. Will a bit of floodlighting help here? It does seem very dark in this cockpit. Get the lighting up. That's a bit better. Now I can just see everything a bit clearer. Okay, we'll continue reading Johnny Johnson's book in the middle of Nip's little night fighting experience. So let's keep reading. "5,000 feet above Nip, a young Beaufighter pilot, Johnny Topham, stalked an enemy bomber. Topham closed to firing range and opened up his 4 cannons. He hit the Heinkel in one engine, which began to burn, but the enemy pilot dived away into the murk. Topham followed in a fast dive, determined to finish off the Heinkel. Ahead of him was a glowing light which he thought was the burning engine. The Beaufighter was travelling very fast, and Topham opened fire at Nip's white tail light. As the Beaufighter swerved past the Spitfire, Topham recognised the other fighter and thought, now I'm in front of him, he's bound to think I'm a Hun and let me have it. But both pilots got down safely. Topham called the controller, who told him that the identity of the Spitfire pilot. He jumped into a van and drove to our dispersal, where a thoughtful Nip was stowing away his parachute and flying gear. Topham held out his hand and said, I'm sorry, Nip, I thought you were my Heinkel in that clag up there. And when I got in front of you, I thought my time had come. No, I didn't fire at you, replied Nip. What with the flak and the bombs and the clag, I only wanted to get down. He paused for a few moments and then said, that's the last bloody time they get me up at night. We never became proficient in this type of work, largely because the requirement itself was a basic contradiction of all of our training. During the day we fought and lived as a team, and this was the very essence of our squadron and our wing formation. When we climbed our Spitfires into the darkness, we were oppressed not only by the strange loneliness of our solitary flights, but by the thought of our own severe limitations in the task ahead. But there was one fighter pilot who flew a Hurricane at night and achieved outstanding success. This was the fearless R.P. Stevens of 151 Squadron, and I make special mention of him in this chronicle of day fighting because he, like us, flew a single-seater and he had none of the scientific of aids available to the Beaufighter crews. Before the war, Steve was a commercial pilot and he flew newspapers to Paris. He joined his squadron in early 1941, and to those who flew with him, it seemed as if life itself was of little account to him, for the risks he took could only have one ending. He never concerned himself about the mechanical condition of the hurricane that carried him through the darkened skies night after night to continue his own very personal war. We heard that his wife and children had been killed in one of the Manchester blitzes, and it was said that he screamed like a man demented at the sight of enemy bombers. He found the bombers by the simple method of following the flak bursts from our own gunners. He could always be found in that part of the sky where the flak was heaviest, prowling and searching for the hated enemy. On one occasion, he blew up a bomber and pieces of human flesh and blood stained his own aircraft. He refused to have these removed, and they remained on his aircraft for all to see, a symbol of his private war. He was quite fearless and attacked his opponents at such close range that on some occasions his own Hurricane was badly damaged by the force of the explosion. His end was inevitable, and after destroying at least 14 enemy aircraft at night, he failed to return from a patrol over enemy territory and was never seen again. We have the fondest memories of him. Apart from the Beaufighter squadrons, we shared the airfield at Tangmere with 145 Squadron, who also had Spitfires. The Cheshire Auxiliaries of 610 Squadron were based at the satellite airfield of West Hampnett, and these 3 Spitfire units comprised the Tangmere wing. Soon after our arrival, we began to operate together and sometimes felt our way cautiously across the Channel and over Normandy, the Cherbourg Peninsula and the Pas-de-Calais. One or other of these available squadron commanders led the wing shows and determined the tactics of the day, so that our tactics varied from day to day according to the whims of the leader. It was a most unsatisfactory arrangement. Towards the middle of March, our CO strode into the dispersal hut with some momentous news. Listen, you chaps. Fighter Command are appointing wing commanders to lead the wings. The first 2 have been selected. Sailor Milan is going to Biggin, and Douglas Bader is coming here. He has just been on the blower and will fly with us. We should be in the thick of all the scrapping. He arrives tomorrow. Bader turned up at Tangmere the following day and was in the air soon afterwards, throwing his Spitfire about the sky. Despite his terrible crash in 1931, when he lost his legs, he was still very keen on aerobatics and contended that no man was master of his aircraft until he could control it in all attitudes. He was careful to point out that precise aerobatics were not of the slightest use in combat, but rather served to give a pilot complete confidence in his Spitfire. Bader's frequent, almost daily displays were the delight of the ground crews, and we all strolled onto the tarmac to watch the wing commander. His favourite manoeuvre was to climb swiftly to a height of about 3,000 feet over the centre of the airfield. Then he would aileron turn into a steep dive, and just above our heads reef the Spitfire into a series of upward rolls before regaining level flight with a roll off the top. The display was faultless whenever he carried out 2 upward Charlies, but after days at Tangmere he attempted to introduce a 3rd roll into the drill. The evolution was now seldom achieved with its former polish, and often our wing commander stalled his Spitfire and spun ignominiously before the assembly. But his aerobatics revealed the pattern of his approach to life. He would not give up, and he tried, without marked success, to perfect the manoeuvre. Sometime later, there was posted to the squadron a somewhat elderly, pedantic, and heavily mustachioed flight lieutenant, who, although possessing no combat experience, proved to be an aerobatic pilot of exceptional ability. One hot day in the early summer, Bader had given the troops his usual breezy performance, and he was now lounging in his undershirt, cooling off after his exertions in the warm cockpit, and chatting to Billy Burton and Ken Holden. "You know, Billy, the Spit's not built to do more than 2 upward Charlies before the roll off the top. It's just not got the speed. I've pulled it off once or twice, but she's very slow at the top, uncomfortable." And the wing commander sucked his pipe reflectively. He continued, "We ought to start some formation aerobatics here. The ground troops would love it. Ken could lead, I'll fly on the starboard, and Billy on the port. And if the Huns won't come up, we'll put on a show over Saint-Omer. But any further conversation was interrupted by the shattering roar of a Spitfire that retracted its wheels a few feet above our heads. It was our new flight lieutenant. Barda looked displeased and grunted. "I say, Billy, who's that chap? Can't have that sort of thing. Bad flying discipline." We turned away to hide our grins. I need to just adjust course right because we're just off by a few degrees from desired track. All eyes were now glued on the newcomer, whose stall turned and streaked down towards our little group. Overhead, he pulled the Spitfire into a steep climb, and straight as an arrow, he commenced a series of beautiful climbing rolls. It was as if he had thrown down the gauntlet at the wing commander's feet. Fascinated, we watched and counted the evolutions. 1, 2, we chanted out loud. "He'll never do the roll-off," said Barda. 3, we chorused, and the Spitfire, now quite vertical, arced directly above. "He'll never make it, no speed. I could have told him," commented Barda. Very slowly, but with perfect timing, the Spitfire half rolled off the top of the loop and resumed level flight. The whole maneuver was carried out with exquisite skill, and to demonstrate that it was no fluke, the pilot repeated the performance and then side-slipped his Spitfire to a perfect 3-point landing. And so he became the aerobatic king of Tangmere. Soon after Barda's arrival, we flew on a 2-squadron sweep. We were to climb across the channel, poke our noses over Boulogne, skirt down the Somme estuary and withdraw. Although the Luftwaffe had withdrawn some of its fighter units from northern France to Romania to support the campaign in the Balkans, a considerable number of fighters and bombers remained to oppose us. During these early spring days of 1941, both sides regarded the Channel as neutral territory, and Spitfires and Messerschmitts often clashed in bitter air battles. There had been no time for Barda to teach his own theories of combat formations and tactics. For this show, we would fly in the old, tight, line-astern style, and he would lead our squadron. Climbing and still holding a close formation, we curved across the Channel. I was in the number 3 position in Barda's section, and ahead of me were Cocky and the wing commander. Behind me, in the unenviable tail-end Charlie position, was an apprehensive Nip. Suddenly, I spotted 3 lean 109s, only a few hundred feet higher than our formation and travelling in the same direction. Obviously, they hadn't seen us, and would make an ideal target for a section of 145 Squadron, who was still higher than the 109s. I should have calmly reported the number, the type, and the position of the 109s to our leader, but I was excited, and I shouted, "Look out, dog's body!" The other pilots of the wing weren't waiting for further advice from me. To them, "look out" was a warning of the utmost danger, of the dreaded bounce by a strong force of 109s. Now they took swift evasive action and half-rolled, dived, aileron turned, and swung out in all directions like a wedge of fast-moving teal avoiding a wild fowler on the coast. In far less time than it takes to tell, a highly organised wing was reduced to a shambles, and the scattered sections could never be reformed in time to continue the planned flight. I was the last to land, for I had realised the error and I knew the consequences would be unpleasant. They were all waiting in the dispersal hut. "Now close the door, Billy," ordered Barda. And then, "Now who's the clot who shouted 'look out'?" I admitted that I was the guilty party. "Very well, now tell us what we had to look out for," demanded the angry wing commander. "Well, sir, there were 3 109s, a few hundred feet above." "3 109s?" interrupted Barda. "We could have clobbered the lot, but your girlish scream made us think there were 50 of the brutes behind us." This public rebuke hurt deeply, but it was well justified, for our operation together had been a complete failure thanks to my error. Barda went on to deliver an impromptu lecture on tactics. We were utterly dependent upon each other for cross-cover and for accurate reporting. In future, the words "look out" would not be used. In dire emergencies, we would cry "break port, blue section," or even "break port, Ken," for Bada preferred the use of Christian names. The pilot who called the break would then be responsible for controlling the safety of the formation until it was out of danger. In all other instances, enemy aircraft would be reported according to the clock code, with full details thus: Dog's body from Red 2, 6109s at 2 o'clock high, about 2,000 yards. Bada concluded his lecture, and since he was always quick to forgive, he gave me an encouraging grin when he stumped out of the dispersal hut. I would never forget this lesson. One morning shortly afterwards, we were released until noon after some night patrols. I had not flown during the night, and Ken had left instructions that I was to check the Spitfires of our flight and carry out any air tests that were necessary. I was discussing the aircraft with our flight sergeant when the wing commander swaggered in. We sprang to attention. "Sit down, old boy, where's the chaps?" "In bed, sir," I answered. "They were all up late on a fighter night, and we didn't come to readiness, and we won't come to readiness until 1 o'clock. "Did they have any luck?" he inquired. "No, sir, none of them had a squirt," I replied. Bada grunted. "The Spitfire's not as good as the Hurricane at night. There's more room in the cockpit and it's got a better view. And the Spit's much trickier to land at night on the little narrow undercarriage." He paused to light his pipe and continued. "I'm having a Hurricane sent down which I'll fly at night. Sailors got a couple of Heinkels one night last year, and there's no reason why we shouldn't hack down a few more. What are you doing now?" "Flight Lieutenant Holden sent me down to check our aircraft, sir. I've got a couple of air tests," I answered. "Good show, grinned Bada. You and I will side-slip up through this bit of cloud, nip across the channel, and see if we can bag a couple of Huns before lunch. It will be a pleasant surprise for Flight Lieutenant Holden, eh?" I said there would be little doubt on this score. We took off together and we climbed through several layers of cloud. When we finally broke out into the warm sunshine, Bada grinned and waved his hand before his face, which was the signal for me to take up a wide abreast position. I could hardly believe that I was flying as wingman to the legendary pilot. But there he was, only a few yards away, with his initials and his wing commander's pennant painted on the fuselage of his Spitfire. There would be no reporting mistakes this time. The radio buzzed with static and the Tangmere controller broke the silence. "Dog's body from Beetle, are you receiving?" Bada was equally abrupt. "Loud and clear, out." Soon afterwards the controller again. "Dog's body, what are your intentions?" Silence from Dog's body. Now Bada was curving our Spitfires to the south. Beachy Head should be below, and in 10 minutes we would be crossing the French coast. "Dog's body, I say again, what are your intentions?" The station commander would like to know. This, of course, was an order that could not be ignored. "Tell him that Dog's body section, 2 aircraft, are going out on a little snoop over the channel. Nothing exciting, just a little routine snoop, out." The controller acknowledged this information, but he was on the air again within a few seconds. "Dog's body, you are not to proceed with your flight. You are to return immediately. I say again, return immediately. Is this understood?" Bada said that it was fully understood, and he uttered a strong oath that stung the ears of the controller and started the WAF plotters in the ops room, for all our conversations were broadcast on loudspeaker. But we turned about and we dropped through the cloud to pick up the Sussex coastline. "Line astern, Johnny, and I'll show you how to get on the tail of a 109. A steep climb, a tight turn, tighter yet. We can always turn inside the brutes, and..." A rude noise was meant to imitate the machine gun fire. "Nothing to it, a piece of cake, isn't it? Once more." That concludes Chapter 5 of Wing Leader. Probably a good time to just put the head back into the sim here, because it looks like we may be halfway, or more than halfway, 2/3 of the way there now. Yas Island is, I am pretty sure, this island out in front of me, slightly to my left. That kind of matches up with the track I need to be on. So let's just get the track a little better. I can probably come left again. I feel like I'm just a little bit more off course than I need to be. Oops. That'll do. Good. So a bit of TMP checking and fuel checking. Everything's green out. Tons and tons of fuel. Could fly for hours. Had plenty when we got airborne. Everything's in the green there. Everything else is fine. Cockpit secure. On track. 32 nautical miles out. Airspeed is 100 just below. I'm going to climb now, and then we'll give ourselves a bit of a descent down at the end. So let's turn off the autopilot and fly manually for a little bit. So power on, nosing up. I'll just drop my seat back down so I've got a better view of the cowling that I can then perch on the horizon to gain some altitude. Try and get up to about 3,500, maybe 4,000 feet. So we're gaining another 1,000 feet. Don't want to get much slower than about 80. Relaxing the climb just a bit. I'll push the throttle full forward. Some really nice patterns on the sea down there, despite the sea being incredibly flat, and still some really nice patterns just below the horizon. Need to adjust course right slightly. Really like to just touch that heading indicator over again. 3,500. We'll gain 400 more feet, and then I'll level off. So a pretty reasonable climb we've got happening here. Let's just check in with ATC. Just check Emirates Centre. We're crossing into the Emirates airspace. Probably crossed in actually when we went. Feet wet back there. Nearest airport list. Yas Island is there. I'm still 27, 28 nautical miles out. That probably is Yas Island. I'm pretty sure that is. Or the second one. It's one of these two anyway. There's my altitude, level off. Autopilot can go back on. Heading and altitude. So we should hold 4,000 feet. And we should hold this heading of about 130. Desired track is 124, actual track is 126. Range 26, so it's going to be that second island, I think. Not always the most obvious thing. Lean the mixture up a bit more. Airspeed's now quite quick, so we're going to accelerate for this last portion of the track. Qatari 764, okay, that is not us. Yeah, I'm gonna stick with probably gonna stick with Yas Island. 23 miles out now. Nautical. There is an airfield over there. On the north side of this island. That could be Yas. I've got a port and a long sort of stick coming off, but from memory I thought Yas was more of a circular shape. Bring up the map, the VFR map. Yas is the second one. So I'm going to skip past this first island here, and Yas is definitely that island in the distance. This looks like Delma Island. Checking my RPM is in the green still, good. I'm going to push that forward a bit. Keep it in the green, but just give the engine a shove, so 2550 RPM now. Airspeed's well up over 115. 20 miles out. So we're inside the 20 nautical mile mark now. I'm going to join the Yas Island radio channel. OMBY traffic. Select the runway for landing. Now that's interesting. I have to look at the map for this. Okay, I want to land straight in on 12. The maps are not very good here. Runway 13, there it is. So I'm going to land straight in on runway 13. And then as I get closer, I'll announce my full stop. So this is an uncontrolled airfield by the looks of things. Speed's good. RPM's just a touch too high. Just on the top of the green. Quick check of my T's and P's. Green, green, and green. Fuel quantity's fine. Everything looking good. I won't bother with any landing checks just yet. I'll leave those for a bit longer. Just a visual check over to the left, make sure nothing's getting airborne up out of that airfield and heading towards me, which fortunately it's not. RPM's just creeping up again here. I might just try and sit that on 2500 just for a little bit of security, a little bit of a buffer. Where is my runway? No sign of it yet visually as we approach the 14 nautical mile range. Very, very bright and pale conditions out there. Flying along under this bright, hot, clear sky is not the most exciting stuff you can do. Got the sun behind us, off to the right there, which is why the front of the cockpit here is in shadow, because of the wing and the roof of the cabin are just shadowing me out. There's a little bit of light inside the back by the passengers and passenger seats. 12 nautical. See if we can see the runway now. I see it there. I'm going to adjust course left a fraction. That's just going to bring me across this line here, and then when I get up to about the coast I'll make a right turn, or maybe about here, 5 miles out from the coast, we'll make a right turn and we'll start a descent straight in. I'm not going to do a certain, I'm not going to join the pattern, I'm just going to do a straight in approach from here. I need to get the local altimeter settings. 2942 for Doha. That's close enough. Okay, well, that's only going to change the altimeter by 10 feet or so. Basically had it set correctly already anyway, but it's worthwhile just checking. Now we're starting to line up a bit on this runway heading, which comes out like this. So we're going to be, I think when the runway is about there on top of this carbon monoxide indicator, then we'll turn in. Or 5 miles, whichever is the closer. I think we're probably going to hit 5 miles first. Going at quite the clip at the moment. Runway 13. I'm not going to announce full stop landing just yet. I think we're considerably far enough out to not have to worry about that. Nearly lined up for the right turn. Feet up on the rudders. A little bit of cockpit security then. Fuel is fine. Plenty of both. T's and P's are good. Mixture will go full rich shortly. Just accidentally knocked the mixture lever back then. That was unintentional. Fuel cock is set to the right position, which is both tanks. And I've got plenty in both. I'll turn the taxi and landing lights on a bit later. Fuel pump I won't need just yet. Okay, we're almost at my 5 mile mark, 7.2. I think we're lined up actually. I'm going to turn the autopilot off. Going to bring the engine throttle back and make this right turn. So a little bit earlier than I think I had estimated I would be able to do it. I'm going to put the top of the compass, this compass here, just below the horizon. Actually, I'll lift the seat up. So there we go. I've got the top of the compass significantly below the horizon. Let's call in for our approach. Ah, here we go. So I've got announced position. 6 miles northwest, 3,700 feet inbound to land, runway 13. Wow, that's really good. That's a far better system than I'm used to from X-Plane. Okay, we're 6 miles northwest, that's just all correct. Says 5.3 nautical. Approach speed's okay at this rate. I'm not going to say I'm on final, that's just my joining. So you could join the crosswind, you could join the downwind. That's really cool. You can basically choose the point on the circuit you want to join, and then you just radio that in and it knows what you're talking about. Throttle needs to come back as the nose comes down. I need to get the airspeed down below 80 so I can deploy flap. There's a good. Okay. I'm happy with this approach. Time for the landing light. And the taxi light. No, actually, the taxi light can still stuff. Good. Landing light on. Everything's there. As soon as I pull the nose up, we'll just lose a bit of airspeed and it'll be time to deploy the flap. I'm going to hold the flap because I've just got it set to all or nothing. I don't have a flap set to incremental steps, which I should have. I just keep forgetting to bind it properly. When I first bound it, I didn't realize I'd bound it to full deployment or fully up. So pulling the throttle back to 0. Let the nose drop down. We'll gain some airspeed in this maneuver. I don't mind doing that. Just trying to flatten out this approach a bit. When I deploy these flaps, it's going to suddenly feel like we are pointing at the ground. Could do a flapless landing actually. There's plenty of runway here. Approach is a bit high. Maybe I should join the downwind and come around. Push the nose forward. Too fast, too high. Gonna join the downwind here then. So I'll put the radio call in for a downwind. We'll go left. So downwind for run 3. And we'll turn left on base. I'm going to do a base turn. I don't like doing square base legs. That's silly. I'll extend a wee way out. Good, nice and slow. Base. Base for runway 13. Turning in. Flaps. Airspeed's disappearing. Okay. Curved final approach. Let's announce final now. Final 13, full stop. Good. Get rid of that radar menu, radio menu. 70 knots. Runway 13. I know I'm heading for the right runway. That's always a good sign. Bring the nose up. A little bit of a crosswind from the left, but very light. A little bit of power on. And I'm just going to hold this attitude. Bring the airplane to a gentle rollout here. Pretty happy about that. Taxi light. Flaps up. Look for an exit. So there do not appear to be any concrete exits that I can see. It's probably going to be one of those ones where I just have to taxi off onto the grass, which I'm entirely happy doing, given that we're in a light little Cessna. Let's just make sure we've got full rich mixture. Should have done that already, actually. Probably could have turned the fuel pump on too on final approach. Mixture was just a little bit leaner than rich. I'm not seeing any taxiways off this runway. Now, strangely, I've got a strong crosswind from the right, according to that windsock down there. At the other end of the field, I'm just going to see if we can see it, I've got almost no wind, and from the left. So at the other threshold, the wind's coming from that direction, and it's very light. At this end of the airfield, the wind's coming from that direction, and it appears to be very strong. So the windsocks are clearly all over the place. Let's exit here. Up on the grass now. Taxiing over to the clubhouse. Park's sort of into wind. Reconfirm the flaps are up. We'll turn some electrics off. Radios are all off. Everything looks good here. Bring the mixture back. And there we are. The aircraft has stopped by itself for some reason, so I didn't even get to shut the aircraft down properly. As soon as I pulled the mixture, the game has decided I've finished. 56 minutes, 17 hours, 56 minutes, 17 seconds of airborne time for this flight from Ul-Adiad to Yas Island. Nice one. Very much enjoyed that. Got quick external views. At this point, it doesn't seem like we can do replays. I need to find out if that's possible, and it seems like it's not possible. So we can't review the landings. I do think that was actually quite a decent landing. Okay, I landed quite long down the runway after a nice long fly down, but that was, I think, a pretty good three-pointer, just left of center line, nice and smooth. So there we are. See you again for the next one.